Back in 2016, my friends and I, for the longest time, had been itching to go camping to our local camping site in the Los Padres National Park in Southern California. When we found the perfect weekend to go that didn't interfere with any of our work schedules, we set the date. 3 days before the trip, we found out we were going to be hit by the El Nino rainstorm. Us, being the type of dudes that we were, didn't care if we got hit by the rainstorm while camping, so we packed up our cars and made the 45-minute drive to the campsite. The campsite was a family-friendly one, where there were about 100 camping lots that had circled around the clearing in the forest. We found the perfect spot that was underneath huge, thick trees that would help block as much rain as possible, and it helped out that the restrooms were only 30 yards away. As soon as we got to our spot, we took advantage of the afternoon sky being cleared for the moment, and we rushed to set up our spot. The layout that we did was that we pitched our tents close by, where our tent doors were only 6 feet apart. The reason why we did this is because in order to combat the rain, I bought a 30-foot by 30-foot thick blue canopy tarp that I threw over to cover us from the rain above and from the rain that would be running through the ground. It was a genius move on my part, but whenever you would walk around our tent, you would be making so much noise from crunching on the plastic tarp. Hours passed and we were all around the campfire. It was late into the evening, and this was the first time that I noticed that there were barely any other campers. They were mainly camping in RVs, like the fake campers they were. In honest opinion, they were the smart ones, unlike my friends and I, who were sleeping in 2 small tents, with our only protection being the blue tarp. I was getting tired from a long day of work, and I decided that I was going to knock out. My friends followed my lead as well. The way that the sleeping arrangements were was that I had my friend Ray sleeping in my tent, and AJ and S were sleeping in theirs. Before I called it a night, I whispered to Ray and told him, I'm going to prank call S and AJ, but I'm not going to say anything. Ray smiled as I dialed my friends up. I called them on restricted, and S's phone started to ring. Both of them, being the way that they are, got timid very easily. Their conversation went something like this. Who's calling you this late at night? I don't know, they called me on restricted. Are you going to answer? Of course not. Ray and I were holding in our laughter as they ignored our call. I decided to do it one more time. Once their phone started to ring, they started to freak out once again and said, Who is it this time? Same person. I think I'm going to answer. As they did answer, S said in a very shaky tone, Hello? Ray and I had to hold in our laughter as we kept as quiet as possible, not wanting to make any noises that would give off that it was us. I held the phone close to my mouth as I began to breathe heavily. I ended the call, and just hearing them freak out the way that they did was making my night even funner. Me, being the idiot that I am, called them one more time. S picked up the phone immediately and said in a tough voice, Look, whoever this is better stop. This is not a threat. Ray and I looked at one another and at the same time began to moan so loudly that we immediately started to burst out into laughter. AJ and S were so mad at us for pulling this prank on them that they were cursing us out. And me, finally calming down from laughing so much, told the boys good night and that I would have pancakes ready for them in the morning. Since I fell asleep relatively easily, I was out in a matter of minutes, while Ray, AJ and S were up for a while longer. I was the first of my friends to wake up in the morning, and as promised, I had the pancakes already cooking by the time that anyone else woke up. The smell of my cooking woke up my friends, and one by one, they got out of their tents. As we were eating, AJ spoke up and said, Hey Jay, the prank that you pulled last night went a little too far. My other friend chimed in, Yeah, you had us ready to run to our car and take off. Me, feeling a bit guilty, apologised to them. The conversation continued to go on like this. It's one thing to prank call us like that, but then to walk around our tent and then go inside it in the middle of the night is totally off limits. Me, not knowing what they're talking about, asked them what they meant. Come on, still with the jokes. You were the one that was walking around our tent, and you walked in. Ray spoke up and said that wasn't Jay who was walking around. I thought that was one of you two getting your revenge on us for scaring you. So to explain, after I fell asleep, about an hour had passed where Ray, S and AJ were still up and all was quiet in the forest until the sounds of footsteps were heard stepping on our blue tarp that was on the ground. At first, my friends thought that it could have just been a forest animal wandering around, but the heavy footsteps were a dead giveaway that it was a person. As they described, the person was walking all around our tents, making constant figure eights. The three of them were already having their hearts pounding out of their chests. It was silent for a long minute, until the sound of the tent zipper was being slid open. As AJ said, the tent's door was only open halfway, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. But in the darkness, both S and AJ saw the silhouette of a man's face pop his head into the tent and look at both of them. AJ and S pretended that they were asleep the entire time, but they both kept their eyes locked onto the man. The man then opened the tent fully and walked inside. Just standing at the entrance, the man didn't say a word or do anything, just watched the both of them laying in their sleeping bags. After the longest minute ever, the man just took his steps out of the tent and his footsteps were heard walking away and disappearing into the night. The entire time that this was happening, S and AJ thought that it must have been either me or Ray that was doing this, and Ray thought that it was AJ or S doing this to get back at us. So we're arguing back and forth at the breakfast table when we were interrupted by a man walking towards our campsite. He comes over and says good morning to us and asks us how the four of us slept the night before. This man spoke in a smoker's voice, as if he'd been doing it for all 45 years of being alive. He wore a dirty, sweat-stained white t-shirt that looked more grey at this point, and his blue jeans looked as if they'd never been taken off from his body. He smelt like liquor, not a good sign at 8 in the morning, and his words were just mumbling around. We didn't say a word to this guy, as he then asks us if we had any cigarettes to spare him. I said that we didn't smoke, and he says, "Oh well, if you boys want to visit me in my RV, just stop by any time." The man continued to walk towards the restrooms, and as he was done using it, he walked back to our campsite. He didn't say anything this time, but looked at us and gave us a nearly toothless smile and walked back to his RV. I took note of his RV, as it was the only RV that stuck out as being dirty and more run down than the others. We quickly summed up this man as the person who was walking around our tents last night, and S and AJ now remembered that they had smelt liquor from the person who was standing in their tent. We all agreed that we would keep an extra eye out on this guy, and if he did spend another night, we would most likely report him to the park rangers if he tried anything else. Now around lunchtime, this man came back, not to use the restroom, but he came over to talk to us and says, "So are any of you boys interested in buying an RV? You can all go check it out right now and see if you want to buy it. I don't need it anymore since my wife left me. Just check out the inside of the RV." I told him that we were good and said this with a visible threatening tone. The man seemed to notice this and he walked away. The man did actually end up leaving just a few hours before sunset, but the entire time that he was there, he kept glancing at us. The man had his RV about 50 yards away from us, and I noticed that he had a restroom right next to his RV. Why did he make an effort in walking all the way over to our campsite to use our restrooms? Why did he use ours if RVs come with restrooms already in them? Whatever this man wanted, we were just glad that we could enjoy the rest of our weekend. This story is about a bad experience I had when I went camping on the beach in the summer with my boyfriend. We had the nice idea of camping on the beach instead of going to a hotel, since I always wanted to sleep and hear the waves hitting the shore. We were supposed to stay in our tent for a week. The area had public restrooms with showers and restaurants, so the matter of hygiene and hunger were not an issue. We bought all the supplies we needed for such an adventure. A 2-person tent, which was blacked out so the sun's rays wouldn't come in, an inflatable mattress, a first aid kit. The first nights were no issue. We actually enjoyed every moment of it. always taking our valuables with us whenever we left our tent, as there were other campers there at the time, either single people, couples, and even families. This also includes people who were behaving badly. When night came, you would occasionally hear people laughing, partying, dancing, listening to music, up to taking, substances and getting pretty drunk. We didn't seem to mind, as nobody had bothered anybody for the past 4 days and nights. People were having fun, and as they knew best, no one was being aggressive to that point. On one night, we stayed out later than usual, around 1 a.m, just wandering around the lively streets to listen to street performers, eating out and such, when we stopped at one of such street performers, who seemed to have a lot of people circling him and listening to his music. We realised he wasn't the main character the people were actually gathered for. In the middle of the crowded street, where cars would occasionally pass by, was a middle-aged woman, dancing, completely naked, clearly affected by the abuse of some sort of substance. She was incoherent. She would randomly flirt with people, and she would even expose herself while dancing to the music. Despite the disgust of the musician and the passers-by, we didn't look much into it and decided to leave and go back to our tent and just have a drink in silence. Basically, we're just watching the stars and falling asleep to the sounds of the ocean. While sitting there having a good time, we hear some lady shouting in the distance. It's the same woman we had seen before, but she was not alone. She had friends with her, 2 women and 2 men. They had a camp set up on the same beach as us, with a few tents just further down, but not far enough so that we couldn't hear them or see them, even if it was dark. They lit a fire on the beach where they continued to partake in some illegal substances and dance around the fire. She, of course, is still naked, but this time, she's wearing a see-through skirt. She goes in the ocean for what seems to be an eternity. I remember thinking, how was she not cold? The water was freezing. My boyfriend just shrugged it off and told me not to be bothered. If we don't engage with them, they won't annoy us. So I just let it go. But even so, I always felt as if I was being watched. I put my thoughts aside, so we decided to go to sleep. But being a beautiful night and the air warm, we thought of not closing the tent completely. Just zip up the mosquito cover so the air would circulate inside the tent and have the sun shine in the morning to wake us up early. I don't recall how long I've been sleeping for, but I remember being woken by footsteps circling our tent and a woman softly humming a song. The tent was not very thick. You could hear everything outside of it. I was too afraid to look out. Heck, I was too afraid to even change my position as not to indicate to the outsider that I noticed their presence. All I did was lay down and look outside through the mosquito cover. All of a sudden, I hear the footsteps stop above my head and the voice whispering, "Don't be afraid. I only want to sing you a lullaby." And the footsteps began to circle the tent. I see her feet in front of our tent just passing by, noticing the very familiar long see-through skirt blowing behind her. The next morning, we packed our tent and moved in a different area of the beach, as far away as possible from that woman and her friends.